The signal. The quantum scanner's alarm shattered 3 centuries of silence in the galactic archives. Dr. Kira Ved's antennae twitched as she stared at the reading, her crystalline fingers trembling over the controls. After 15 years of studying dead worlds, she'd never seen anything like this. "That's impossible," she whispered, watching the signal pulse across her screens. Earth's coordinates blazed in ancient Concordat script, a planet quarantined so long ago that most species had forgotten why. The signal pulsed again, stronger this time. It wasn't random noise or stellar interference. This was a deliberate transmission, encrypted in quantum patterns that shouldn't have existed for at least another 1,000 years of galactic development. Kira's research partner, Zextal, floated into the archive chamber, his gaseous form condensing with concern. "You're supposed to be at the emergency briefing. The void swarm just consumed the Rigel sector. 3 billion. He paused, noticing her expression. "What did you find?" "Earth is awake," Kira said, her crystalline structure resonating with excitement. "The humans, they're still there." The name sent ripples through Zextal's form. Humans were more legend than history, a species that had appeared suddenly, fought ferociously, and vanished completely nearly 4 millennia ago. The only traces they'd left behind were ruins so advanced they seemed like magic and warnings written in the blood of those who tried to follow them. "Show me," Zextal demanded, condensing further until he almost resembled a bictal form. Kira transferred the signal pattern to the archive's main holographic display. The quantum signature expanded above them, dancing in complex patterns that made her crystalline eyes ache. "It's not just a signal," she explained, highlighting sections with gestures. "It's an activation key. Something down there is waking up." "The Concordat quarantined that system for a reason," Zextal reminded her. "The last expedition. The last expedition was 3,000 years ago, and we're running out of options." Kira's voice hardened like her crystalline form. "The void swarm has already consumed 1/3 of known space. Our weapons barely slow them down. Our shields can't stop their corruption. We need something the swarm hasn't adapted to. And you think we'll find it on Earth? Among the ruins of a species that abandoned the galaxy." The archive chamber's lights flickered as another signal pulse arrived, stronger than before. New data cascaded across the screens, and Kira's crystalline form resonated with triumph. "They didn't abandon us," she said, translating the quantum patterns. "They were waiting." The next 12 hours passed in a blur of activity. Kira presented her findings to the Concordat's Emergency Council, her evidence overwhelming any objections about the quarantine. The Void Swarm's advance had made even the most conservative counselors desperate for solutions. 3 days later, Kira stood on the bridge of the research vessel Luminous Inquiry, watching Earth grow larger in the main viewport. The planet looked nothing like the dead world described in ancient reports. The continents gleamed with metallic patterns, and massive structures extended from the poles into space. "Energy readings are off the scale," reported Chief Scientist Nazgen, her insectoid mandibles clicking nervously. "The entire planet appears to be encased in some form of quantum shielding, the technology required for something of this magnitude. Look!" Zextal's gaseous form expanded with alarm, pointing at new structures emerging from the planet's surface. Massive rings of dark metal were rising from the oceans, their surfaces covered in pulsing lines of blue energy. The ship's sensors screamed as space itself began to twist around them. A voice filled their communication system, speaking perfect modern Concordat despite its age. Genetic profiles detected. Species identification confirmed. "Welcome, children of the galaxy. We've been expecting you." Before them, the massive rings aligned and began to spin, creating a vortex of controlled spacetime that dwarfed anything in modern engineering. Through it, they could see vast chambers and hangars extending deep into the Earth, filled with rows upon rows of sleeping giants. The legends were wrong, Kira breathed, watching as the first of the massive forms began to stir. They didn't leave. They were building an army. Inside the chambers, thousands of stasis pods began to open. Their occupants were tall, muscular beings encased in armor that made them look more machine than organic. Each bore weapons and technology that radiated power beyond anything in the Concordat's arsenal. The voice spoke again, this time with a note of satisfaction. "Humanity stands ready. Tell us about these void swarm creatures. It's been far too long since we had a proper fight." As the first human warriors stepped through the vortex onto their ship, Kira understood why the ancient Concordat had feared them so much. But now, watching these giants inspect their modern technology with knowing smiles, she felt something else. Hope. The humans hadn't abandoned the galaxy. They'd spent 4,000 years preparing to save it. In the distance, across the vast expanse of space, the Void Swarm continued its relentless advance, unaware that its days of easy conquest were about to end. Humanity was awake, and they hadn't spent their long sleep idly dreaming. They'd been getting ready for war. Awakening the giants. Commander Sarah Chen stood before the assembled Concordat delegation aboard Earth's primary command hub, her quantum-enhanced armor making her tower over even the tallest aliens. 4,000 years of cryogenic sleep hadn't dulled the sharp intelligence in her eyes, nor the military precision of her movements. "Your Void Swarm isn't the first parasitic hive mind we've encountered," she stated, manipulating the holographic display with practiced ease. "During the Terminal Wars, we fought something similar. The Devourers. They nearly won." Dr. Kira Ved watched in fascination as the commander brought up detailed tactical displays, showing battles that had occurred millennia before her species had achieved spaceflight. The human military installation they stood and defied everything she knew about technological progression. The walls themselves seemed alive, constantly shifting and reconfiguring as needed. "How did you defeat them?" asked High Admiral Angstoth, his crystalline form glowing with intense interest. Sarah's expression darkened. "We didn't, not completely. That's why we went into hibernation. We knew they'd return someday in some form. The Void Swarm shares too many characteristics to be a coincidence." The revelation sent ripples of shock through the alien delegation. Zextal's gaseous form swirled with agitation. "You're saying the Void Swarm evolved from these Devourers?" "More likely they're both weapons created by the same ancient species," Sarah explained. "We tracked the Devourers' origin to the galactic core, but by then, their creators were long gone. We realized we weren't ready for that level of threat. So we made a choice." The commander waved her hand, and the chamber's walls became transparent, revealing vast underground complexes stretching for kilometers in every direction. Massive factories, research facilities, and training grounds operated at full capacity, staffed by newly awakened humans and advanced AI systems. "We didn't abandon the galaxy," Sarah continued. "We transformed our entire civilization into a weapon. Every human you see volunteered for the longest military operation in history. While we slept, our AI systems continued developing technology, running simulations, and preparing for every possible scenario." Kira stepped closer to one of the transparent walls, watching in awe as massive war machines were assembled by automated systems. "Your entire species committed to this." "Not everyone." Sarah's voice carried a hint of old pain. "Some colonies chose to remain awake, to watch over the galaxy from the shadows. Others went further out, beyond known space, preparing backup plans we're still activating. But Earth became our fortress, our arsenal, and our promise to return when we were needed most." The facility shuddered as another quantum gate activated, bringing online another sector of the vast underground complex. More stasis chambers opened, releasing soldiers, scientists, and engineers who had slept for millennia, while their automated systems perfected their tools of war. "The Void Swarm has never encountered quantum phase technology," Sarah explained, leading them toward a massive testing chamber. "They can't adapt to what they can't comprehend. Watch." In the chamber, a human soldier activated what looked like a simple rifle. The weapon hummed to life, its internal mechanisms shifting through multiple dimensional states. The test target, composed of material similar to Void Swarm armor, didn't just break apart. It ceased to exist, the very space it occupied folding in on itself. By the first light, Angst whispered, his crystalline form resonating with shock. Your weapons don't just destroy, they erase. Quantum phase tech was theoretical when we went into hibernation, Sarah said. Now it's just the beginning. We've developed systems that can isolate entire regions of spacetime, weapons that can disrupt the swarm's hive-mind connection, and defenses that operate outside normal physical laws. Alarms suddenly blared throughout the facility. A tactical officer, her armor as advanced as Sarah's, approached rapidly. Commander, we're detecting massive Void Swarm fleet movements. They've begun systematic attacks on all major Concordat worlds. This isn't a random expansion anymore. They're trying to prevent us from fully awakening. Sarah's expression hardened. They remember us. Or at least whatever created them remembers what we're capable of. She turned to the Concordat delegation. We're out of time for demonstrations. High Admiral, your people need to make a choice. We can coordinate with your forces, but our methods may seem extreme by your standards. Angst's crystalline form pulsed with determined light. The Void Swarm has consumed billions of our people. We abandoned restraint when they proved immune to diplomacy. Good. Sarah activated a facility-wide command channel. All sectors, initiate Operation Daybreak. Priority targets are swarm command nodes. Deploy quantum phase weapons at will. Show them why humanity went to sleep as legends and woke up as gods. Throughout the vast complex, thousands of stasis pods opened in synchronized sequence. Ships that had waited 4 millennia in quantum storage emerged into reality. Weapons that bent the laws of physics were distributed to troops who had trained for this moment in virtual simulations throughout their long sleep. As Kira watched the massive mobilization, she understood why the ancient Concordat had both feared and revered humanity. They hadn't spent 4,000 years hiding. They'd spent it preparing for this exact moment, developing weapons and strategies so advanced they bordered on supernatural. The Void Swarm had awakened humanity's slumbering giants. Now they would learn why some legends are better left undisturbed. The arsenal of ancient Earth. The Void Swarm's attack on New Alexandria should have been devastating. The agricultural world, home to 12 billion Concordat citizens, had minimal defenses and no strategic value beyond its food production. Instead, the massive swarm fleet encountered something unprecedented. Dr. Kira Ved stood on the bridge of the human quantum dreadnought Prometheus, watching the battle unfold through sensors that operated on principles her crystalline mind could barely comprehend. Beside her, Commander Sarah Chen orchestrated humanity's first major engagement in 4 millennia. Quantum phase barriers holding at full capacity, reported Lieutenant James Wong, his neural interfaces streaming battle data directly to his consciousness. Swarm bioforms are attempting to breach, but they can't maintain physical coherence inside the field. The scene before them defied conventional physics. A shimmering web of quantum energy encased the entire planet, causing the Void Swarm's biological ships to distort and fragment when they touched it. Those that managed to partially penetrate found themselves existing in multiple states simultaneously, their hive-mind connection shattering under quantum uncertainty. They're adapting faster than projected, Sarah observed, her enhanced eyes tracking pattern changes in the swarm's behavior. Initiate Protocol Sunbreaker. Let's show them what 4,000 years of weapons development looks like. From the Prometheus and its escort fleet, geometric patterns of light began to emerge. The humans called them angel wings, quantum phase combat drones that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. As they engaged the swarm, reality itself seemed to tear and reconstruct around them. By the first light, whispered Zextal, his gaseous form condensing in awe. Your weapons, they're not just destroying them. They're rewriting the laws of physics in localized spaces. That was our breakthrough, Sarah explained, directing another wave of angel wings into the fight. The Devourers, and now the Void Swarm, operate by bending natural laws. We learned to break them entirely. The battle above New Alexandria became a demonstration of humanity's terrifying advancement. Swarm bioships, each the size of small moons, were carved apart by weapons that turned their own mass against them. Quantum phase torpedoes created bubbles of altered space-time, where the swarm's adaptive abilities became a liability, their bodies trying to evolve in ways that reality itself wouldn't permit. But the swarm was learning. With each engagement, more of their ships began to exhibit resistance to quantum effects. Their biological armor started shifting through dimensional states of its own, crude but effective mimicry of human technology. "Commander," Kira's voice carried urgency. "Their adaptation rate is accelerating. They're not just learning from each battle, they're accessing ancient memories." Sarah's expression hardened. "They remember us. Not just from the terminal wars. They remember everything." She opened a secure channel to Earth Command. "General Santos, implementing Case Omega. The swarm isn't just similar to the Devourers. They're running the same base code." In response, massive quantum gates began to activate around Earth. From them emerged humanity's true arsenal, weapons and devices that had taken millennia to perfect. Machines that could manipulate the fundamental forces of the universe. Ships that could rewrite the quantum state of entire regions of space. "All human forces, execute Operation Starbreaker," Sarah commanded. "Show them why we spent 4,000 years preparing." The battle shifted into impossible dimensions. Human quantum ships phased through swarm defenses, delivering payloads that turned the enemy's adaptive nature against them. Each human weapon was designed not just to destroy, but to corrupt the very information the swarm used to evolve. But victory came with revelations that shook both humans and aliens alike. As the swarm's ships died, their quantum signatures revealed patterns that humanity had encountered before, not just in the terminal wars, but in archives that predated their own civilization. The swarm, the Devourers, they're not just weapons, Sarah explained to the assembled Concordat leaders after the battle. Their tests, something far older than any of our civilizations, has been seeding the galaxy with these challenges, watching how we respond, how we evolve to face them. Kira's crystalline form resonated with the implications. "You're saying some ancient intelligence is testing all spacefaring life. For what purpose?" "That's what we spent 4,000 years trying to figure out." Sarah brought up a holographic display showing similar patterns repeated across millions of years of galactic history. Every 50,000 years or so, a new version appears. More advanced, more adaptive. The civilizations that survive become stronger. Those that don't become part of the next iteration. Zextal finished, his gaseous form swirling with horror. "Exactly." Sarah's voice carried the weight of millennia of preparation. "Humanity didn't just sleep. We studied. We prepared. Because we knew that beating the swarm wouldn't be enough. We need to find what's creating them, what's been orchestrating these cycles of extinction and evolution since before our species learned to make fire." The quantum displays showed more swarm fleets approaching from all directions. Their biological ships now carried traces of human technology, stolen and perverted through their adaptive capabilities. But humanity had planned for this too. "Let them come," Sarah said, watching the enemy approach. "Every adaptation, every evolution they achieve brings us closer to tracing their origin. We spent 4,000 years building weapons to win this war. But our real mission, that's just beginning." Above New Alexandria, the quantum gates pulsed with new energy as more of humanity's arsenal emerged from storage. The next phase of the war was about to begin. And with it, the hunt for an intelligence that had been manipulating galactic evolution for millions of years. The Void Swarm thought they had awakened sleeping giants. In truth, they had activated hunters who had spent 4 millennia preparing to track down their creators. Fallen worlds. The quantum observatory at Earth's North Pole showed the galaxy bleeding. Red markers indicated fallen worlds, systems where the Void Swarm had adapted to humanity's initial weapons and struck back with devastating force. But it was the blue markers that truly worried Commander Sarah Chen. Worlds where the swarm had begun implementing stolen human technology in ways even their designers hadn't anticipated. They're not just copying our quantum phase weapons anymore, Sarah explained to the assembled War Council. They're improving them. Dr. Kira Ved studied the holographic display, her crystalline form refracting the light of countless battles raging across space. In the 3 months since humanity's awakening, the war had transformed into something beyond conventional understanding. Entire sectors of space flickered between dimensional states as human and swarm forces fought with weapons that distorted reality itself. "Show them," Sarah commanded, and the observatory's AI complied. The hologram shifted to display footage from the recent battle of Centauri Prime. Swarm bioships, now threaded with veins of quantum technology, phased through traditional defenses like ghosts. But instead of simply destroying their targets, they transformed them. Concordat ships, stations, even small moons were being converted into hybrid structures that merged biological and quantum engineering. "They're not trying to destroy us anymore," High Admiral Engstoth realized, his crystalline form dulling with horror. "They're trying to evolve us." "That's what we discovered during our long sleep," Sarah confirmed. "The Void Swarm, like the Devourers before them, aren't weapons of extinction. They're tools of forced evolution. Each cycle creates stronger, more advanced species, or transforms those who can't adapt into components of the next wave." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Zextal's gaseous form coalesced into tight, anxious patterns. "Is this why humanity went into hibernation?" "You discovered the truth." Sarah's expression darkened. "We discovered something worse. General Santos, show them what we found in the deep archives." The observatory's display shifted again, showing data so old it predated human civilization. Patterns of stellar evolution, species development, and technological advancement across millions of years revealed a disturbing truth. The galaxy itself was being shaped, guided by an intelligence that operated on timescales beyond comprehension. "The entity, as we call it, has been running this experiment for at least 50 million years, Sarah explained. Each cycle introduces new challenges, new forms of the swarm, testing different approaches to evolution. Those who survive become stronger, more advanced. Those who fail become raw material for the next iteration. But humanity didn't just hide," Kira observed, studying the ancient data. "You use your hibernation to prepare countermeasures." "We did more than that." Sarah activated a secure channel, and new information flooded the display. "We traced the entity's quantum signature through time. Every version of the swarm, every cycle of evolution, carried traces of its creator. We spent 4,000 years following those breadcrumbs, building weapons that could not just fight the swarm, but pierce the dimensional barriers hiding their source." Alarms suddenly blared throughout the facility. Lieutenant Wong's neural interfaces flashed with urgent data. "Commander, we're detecting massive quantum distortions in the Carina sector. The swarm, they're attempting to open a dimensional rift." The observatory's display shifted to show a scene of cosmic horror. Hundreds of swarm ships, their forms now twisted with perverted quantum technology, had arranged themselves in a massive geometric pattern. Space itself was beginning to tear open at their center. "They're not just adapting to our technology," Sarah realized, her enhanced eyes analyzing the pattern. "They're using it to call for help." The rift expanded, and through it came something that defied description. An entity of such vast scale and complexity that the observatory's sensors could barely process its existence. Parts of it seemed to exist in dimensions beyond normal spacetime, while others phased between states of matter and energy. "The entity," Sarah breathed. "It's noticed us, really noticed us, for the first time in 50 million years. How can we fight something like that?" Engstoth demanded, his crystalline form trembling at the sight. A grim smile crossed Sarah's face. We spent 4,000 years asking ourselves the same question. That's why we didn't just build weapons. We became them. She opened a neural link to all human forces across the galaxy. Initiate Protocol Omega. Authorization, Chen Alpha Zero. Wake the sleepers. Throughout human space, hidden quantum gates began to activate. From them emerged humanity's ultimate weapons, soldiers and ships that had undergone voluntary transformation into hybrid beings of flesh, machine, and quantum energy. They were the products of 4 millennia of controlled evolution, guided not by the entity's cruel tests, but by humanity's determination to end the cycles forever. We didn't just prepare to fight the swarm, Sarah revealed, her own form beginning to shift as dormant quantum enhancements activated. We prepared to hunt down their creator. And now it's finally shown itself. As the entity emerged fully into normal space, humanity's true arsenal revealed itself. The war for survival was about to become something else entirely. A hunt 4,000 years in the making, led by a species that had transformed itself into the ultimate predator. The entity had spent millions of years testing the galaxy's species. Now it would learn what it meant to be tested itself. Humanity ascended. The entity hung in the void like a tear in reality itself, its vast form simultaneously existing in countless dimensions. Around it, the combined fleets of humanity and the Concordat gathered for what would either be the final battle of a 50-million-year cycle or the last stand of conscious life in the galaxy. But Commander Sarah Chen, if she could still be called that in her current form, felt only anticipation. Her transformed body, a perfect fusion of biological evolution and quantum engineering, resonated with 4,000 years of purpose finally reaching its crescendo. All human forces execute final protocol. She transmitted across quantum channels that the entity couldn't corrupt. Show them what humanity has truly become. Across the battlefield, human soldiers and ships began to change. Their carefully engineered forms, the product of millennia of voluntary evolution, shifted into states of existence that even the entity hadn't imagined possible. They became beings of pure quantum potential, existing simultaneously across multiple dimensions while maintaining their human consciousness and determination. Dr. Kira Ved watched from the quantum observatory as reality itself seemed to warp around the combatants. They're not just fighting it, she realized, her crystalline form vibrating with understanding. They're rewriting the rules of existence. That was always the plan. Sarah's voice resonated through quantum space. The entity spent millions of years testing species, forcing them to evolve according to its rules. We spent 4,000 years learning to break those rules entirely. The battle that followed defied conventional description. Human quantum ships phased through dimensional barriers that had stood for millions of years, their weapons striking at the very foundations of the entity's existence. The Void Swarm, now revealed as merely an extension of their creator's will, found their adaptive abilities useless against beings that could change the nature of reality itself. But the entity was ancient and powerful. It lashed out with weapons that could erase entire star systems from history, trying to unmake the humans who dared to challenge its authority over evolution. Space itself buckled under the conflict between a being that had guided galaxy-wide evolution for millions of years and a species that had spent 4 millennia preparing to end its reign. You don't understand. The entity's thoughts boomed across all frequencies, its first direct communication in millions of years. I guide evolution to prepare for what comes between galaxies. Without my tests, life would remain weak, vulnerable to threats you cannot comprehend. Sarah's response, transmitted through the quantum network that connected all transformed humans, carried the weight of 4,000 years of preparation. We understand perfectly. We spent our long sleep not just studying your tests, but looking beyond them. And we found something you never did. A way to evolve without sacrificing our humanity. At her signal, humanity's final weapon activated. Not a device or a ship, but the culmination of 4 millennia of quantum research, a cascading wave of altered reality that spread across space-time itself. Where it passed, the arbitrary laws and limitations the entity had placed on evolution began to dissolve. What have you done? The entity's thoughts carried genuine fear for the first time in millions of years. We've freed evolution, Sarah explained, as the wave continued to spread. No more cycles. No more tests. No more forcing species to change according to your vision. We're giving the galaxy back its right to grow on its own terms. The entity tried to resist, to maintain its control over the laws of evolution it had enforced for so long. But humanity's transformation wave continued to spread, powered by the combined quantum potential of billions of voluntarily evolved humans. The void swarm, cut off from their creator's control, began to dissolve into their component particles. As the entity's power waned, Dr. Kira Ved made a startling observation. The quantum wave. It's not just changing space, it's changing time. The effects are propagating backward, freeing every species that was ever trapped in the entity's cycles. Freedom, Sarah transmitted, her form now existing across multiple dimensions simultaneously, isn't just about breaking chains in the present. It's about ensuring they were never forged in the first place. The entity, its power finally broken, began to fade from existence. But before it vanished, it transmitted one final message. You could have become gods. Sarah's response carried the wisdom of a species that had spent 4,000 years preparing for this moment. We chose to remain human instead. That's why we won. In the aftermath, as the quantum wave continued to reshape reality according to natural laws rather than imposed ones, the galaxy faced a new dawn. Species that had been forced into the entity's evolutionary paths began to discover their own potential. The Concordat, freed from the threat of extinction, started to explore technologies that had been previously impossible under the entity's restrictions. And humanity. They maintained their transformed state, not as gods or tyrants, but as guardians. They had remade themselves not to rule, but to ensure that no force would ever again attempt to control the natural course of evolution. Dr. Ved, studying the changes spreading across the galaxy, asked Sarah what humanity would do now that their 4,000-year mission was complete. Sarah, her form shifting between dimensions as naturally as breathing, smiled. Now we get to do something we haven't done in 4 millennia. We get to evolve alongside everyone else, not as experiments or weapons, but as equals. And this time, we'll do it while awake. Above them, the galaxy sparkled with new potential, free at last to grow and change according to its own nature. The age of enforced evolution was over. The age of freedom had begun. And humanity, the species that had slept for 4,000 years to break the chains of enforced destiny, finally allowed themselves to dream of a future they would shape together with all the other children of the stars. Not as gods, not as weapons, but as humans who had proven that the greatest evolution comes not from external force, but from the choice to remain true to oneself while reaching for the impossible. The long night was over. The dawn had come at last. First contact and confusion. The RSS Curiosity drifted silently through the void, its quantum sensors probing the depths of unexplored space. Dr. Maya Rodriguez stood at the helm, her dark eyes fixed on the holographic display that wrapped around the bridge like a transparent cocoon. The research vessel's mission was simple: map the unknown regions beyond the Orion Arm. But simplicity had a way of becoming complicated in space. Contact, announced the ship's AI, ARIA. Multiple signatures detected at bearing 047. Configuration unknown. Maya straightened, her attention sharpening. Show me. The holographic display shifted, revealing a fleet of massive vessels unlike anything in human records. They resembled crystalline structures more than traditional ships, their surfaces reflecting starlight in mesmerizing patterns. Before Maya could issue orders, a transmission cut through their communications. Attention unauthorized vessel. You have entered the sovereign territory of the crystalline Concordat. Your presence violates 10,000 years of isolation protocols. Prepare for immediate quarantine and processing. The voice was artificially translated, but carried unmistakable authority. Maya exchanged glances with her first officer, Dr. James Chen, who raised an eyebrow in amusement. 10,000 years, he whispered. Someone needs to get out more. Maya suppressed a smile and opened a channel. This is Dr. Maya Rodriguez of the research ship Curiosity. We apologize for any intrusion. We're an exploratory vessel from Earth, seeking peaceful contact with other civilizations. There was a pause before the response came. Earth is not in our records. Your level of technology indicates a primitive civilization. Submit to quarantine for proper categorization. The crystalline ships began to move, their formation shifting to surround the Curiosity. Maya noticed her crew maintaining their composure, some even hiding grins. They all knew what was coming. With respect, Maya replied, "We'd prefer to skip the quarantine. Perhaps we could arrange a diplomatic meeting instead. We'd be happy to share information about our civilization. Your vessel's primitive design indicates you have barely mastered faster than light travel. Resistance is inadvisable. Our weaponry is beyond your comprehension." James snorted. "Should we tell them about the ship's actual capabilities?" Maya considered for a moment. The Curiosity, like all human vessels, was designed with the philosophy of elegant simplicity. Its outer hull appeared basic to most scans, hiding layers of complexity that had taken humanity centuries of competitive innovation to develop. Crystalline Concordat vessels, we're transmitting our basic technical specifications now. Please review them before taking any aggressive action. The data burst contained only publicly available information about human technology, quantum entangled communications, dark energy drives, probability manipulation fields, and the basics of human computing architecture. The response took longer this time. When it came, the artificial tone couldn't quite hide the shock in the alien voice. This cannot be accurate. Your species claims to have achieved quantum supremacy within a single planetary lifetime, to have mastered probability manipulation within 3 centuries of discovering electricity. Actually, Maya replied, those are our older systems. Would you like to see something really interesting? We've been working on some new theories about consciousness-driven reality manipulation. The crystalline ships had stopped their advance. Maya could almost feel the confusion radiating from them. How? The question came with none of the previous authority. Our records indicate that technological progress follows strict evolutionary patterns. 10,000 years of careful advancement. Millennia of controlled development. You cannot have. You should not be. Maya leaned forward in her chair. Perhaps that's the difference. We never knew we couldn't. Humanity has always been driven by curiosity, by the need to push boundaries. We compete, we cooperate, we question everything. Every failure teaches us something new. But the risks, the chaos of uncontrolled advancement, led to some spectacular failures, Maya acknowledged, but also to breakthroughs nobody could have predicted. We've learned that progress isn't linear. Sometimes you have to embrace the chaos to find new patterns. The silence stretched longer this time. Maya used the pause to study the crystalline ships more carefully. Their design was beautiful but static, like perfect sculptures that hadn't changed in eons. Finally, the alien voice returned, now carrying a hint of what might have been wonder. We request an exchange of information. Your approach to technological development is unprecedented in our records. Maya smiled. We'd be delighted. Though I should warn you, we have a lot of questions. Humanity's curiosity can be a bit overwhelming at first. Perhaps, the voice replied, with what might have been the alien equivalent of dry humor. After 10,000 years of certainty, a little overwhelming curiosity is exactly what we need. As arrangements were made for formal diplomatic contact, Maya caught James grinning broadly. "What's so funny?" she asked. "Just thinking," he replied. "We came out here hoping to learn from advanced alien civilizations. Instead, we might end up teaching them the most fundamental human trait of all." "Oh, and what's that?" The art of being happily wrong about everything we think we know. Around them, the crystalline ships began to shift, forming an honor guard rather than a quarantine circle. The Curiosity's first contact had turned from potential conflict to cultural exchange, not through force or fear, but through humanity's most powerful weapon, the ability to imagine what might be instead of accepting what is. Maya settled back in her chair, already formulating questions about crystalline computing architecture and wondering how it might combine with human quantum systems. The universe, she reflected, was about to get a lot more interesting. The cultural clash. The grand reception hall of the crystalline Concordat's flagship was exactly what one would expect from a civilization that hadn't redecorated in 10 millennia. Perfect geometric patterns covered every surface, each angle precise to the millionth decimal place. The overall effect was beautiful but sterile, like a mathematician's dream frozen in time. Maya and her diplomatic team tried not to look too amused as their hosts. The Concordat's High Council struggled to process the chaos that was human innovation. The aliens themselves resembled their ships, crystalline beings whose faceted bodies caught and reflected light in complex patterns. Their language consisted of light pulses through their crystalline forms, though they used translators for interspecies communication. Let us understand this correctly. The first resonator, their equivalent of a senior scientist, pulsed with barely contained agitation. Your species deliberately introduces random variables into experiments. Not just experiments, Dr. James Chen replied cheerfully. We built randomness into our basic computing architecture. Quantum uncertainty is a feature, not a bug. The crystalline beings vibrated in what their cultural attaché had explained was their version of collective distress. Maya watched with fascination as patterns of light rippled through the assembled council members. But how can you predict outcomes? Another council member demanded. How can you ensure stability? That's the neat part, Maya interjected. We don't. We create systems that adapt to uncertainty rather than trying to eliminate it. It's why our AI systems evolved so quickly. They learned to thrive on chaos rather than fight it. Araya, the Curiosity's AI, chose that moment to join the conversation through Maya's comm device. Indeed, my original programming contained deliberately introduced errors. Learning to correct them was part of my development process. The first resonator's crystalline form briefly dimmed, their equivalent of a shocked pause. You intentionally created an imperfect artificial intelligence. Perfect systems can't evolve, Araya replied. Imperfection creates room for growth. It's a fundamentally human insight that I've come to appreciate. Maya watched the light patterns cascade through the council members, noting how they unconsciously arranged themselves into rigid geometric formations when stressed. Everything about their civilization spoke of a deep-seated need for order and predictability. But your achievements, the first resonator's translator struggled to convey their tone. Your mastery of quantum mechanics, your probability manipulation fields, your consciousness interface technology, these should have taken millennia of careful, structured development. James grinned. You should have seen our first attempts. Did you know we blew up 3 small moons before we figured out stable quantum field generation? Good times. The horror rippling through the council was almost palpable. Maya decided it was time to redirect the conversation. What we're trying to explain is that human progress isn't linear. We learn as much from our failures as our successes, sometimes more. It's messy and inefficient, but it's also incredibly fast and adaptable. A younger council member, their crystalline form showing subtle variations that suggested recent formation, pulsed hesitantly. But the risks, the chaos, are precisely what make it work, Maya finished gently. Every human advancement came because someone looked at the established way of doing things and asked, what if we tried something completely different? The young council member's light patterns shifted in what might have been interest. And you never break anything important. Oh, we break things all the time, James laughed. The trick is learning how to break things safely and learn from the pieces. Want to see something cool? Araya, show them Project Kaleidoscope. A holographic display materialized in the center of the hall, showing the latest human experiments in quantum crystalline computing. The Concordat members leaned forward despite themselves, their rigid formations momentarily forgotten as they studied the chaotic but brilliant dance of quantum particles through crystalline matrices. "This is unorthodox," the first resonator admitted. "The computational patterns are unlike anything in our archives." "That's because we combined your crystalline architecture theories, which we absolutely love, by the way, with our quantum uncertainty principles," Maya explained. "The results are still unpredictable, but the potential is amazing. You took our most refined technology and deliberately made it messy." A council member pulsed in disbelief. "We prefer the term adaptable," Araya corrected. "Initial tests suggest a 300% increase in processing capability, though I admit some of the solutions it generates can be rather creative." Maya noticed something interesting. The younger council members were gradually shifting position, their formations becoming slightly less rigid as they studied the holographic display. The human tendency toward chaos was apparently infectious. Perhaps, the young council member who had spoken earlier ventured, there is something to be learned from controlled chaos. The first resonator's light patterns suggested they were about to object, but Maya caught a subtle shift in their crystalline structure, a minute imperfection in their usually perfect geometry. The change was tiny but significant, the first crack in 10,000 years of rigid certainty. "We have much to teach each other," Maya suggested diplomatically. "Your understanding of crystalline computing is centuries ahead of ours, and maybe we can help you explore new possibilities you haven't considered." A cultural exchange. The first resonator's patterns showed reluctant interest. "But our protocols could probably use some updating after 10,000 years, James pointed out. "Just a thought." As the council dissolved into intense discussions, their neat formations gradually breaking down into more organic groupings, Maya shared a knowing look with her team. The Concordat was about to experience something they hadn't faced in millennia. Change. "Think they'll be okay?" James whispered. Maya watched the young council member secretly trying to introduce a deliberate imperfection into their crystalline pattern. "They'll adapt. That's the funny thing about chaos. Once you let a little bit in, you start to see the beauty in it." "Speaking of chaos," Araya chimed in, "I've been running simulations on combining their crystalline tech with our consciousness interface systems. Want to see something really interesting?" The grin that spread across Maya's face would have terrified the council members if they'd understood human expressions. Sometimes, she reflected, the best diplomatic gift humanity could offer was the simple courage to ask, "What's the worst that could happen?" Hidden strengths. 3 months into the cultural exchange program, the crystalline Concordat's main research facility had changed almost beyond recognition. Where once stood perfectly aligned workstations in mathematically precise rows, there now existed what the humans affectionately called organized chaos. Crystalline researchers worked alongside human scientists, their formerly rigid patterns showing subtle but significant variations. Maya stood in her favorite observation spot, watching a young crystalline researcher named First Spark deliberately introduce random variables into a quantum computing simulation. The resulting cascade of light through their form would have scandalized the High Council just weeks ago. Now, it barely earned a second glance. "They're adapting faster than anyone expected," James observed, joining her at the viewport. "Remember when they needed 3 days of meditation to accept a single random variable? Hard to believe that was only last month." Maya agreed. "First Spark told me they're starting to see patterns in the chaos, not the rigid structures they used to rely on, but something more organic." Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent announcement over the facility's communication system. "All research leads to Central Chamber 3. Anomaly detected in Joint Experiment Series 42. Maya and James exchanged glances. 42. Isn't that the Consciousness Interface Project? They hurried to the chamber, arriving to find an extraordinary sight. the experimental quantum crystalline matrix, designed to merge human consciousness interface technology with concordat crystalline computing, was producing patterns unlike anything either species had seen before. First spark was there, their crystalline form pulsing with excitement. Dr. Rodriguez, Dr. Chen, look at this. The matrix isn't just processing data, it's evolving. The holographic display showed the hybrid system's output, a constantly shifting landscape of information that somehow maintained coherence despite its apparent chaos. It was neither human nor crystalline in nature, but something entirely new. "Era," Maya called to the ship's eye. "What are you making of this?" "Fascinating," Araya replied, her voice carrying genuine wonder. "The system appears to be using quantum uncertainty principles to generate new crystalline computing architectures, then using those architectures to manipulate quantum states. It's a perfect loop of creation and refinement." The first resonator, who had become surprisingly supportive of the exchange program, moved closer to the display. Their once perfect crystalline form now showed subtle asymmetries that would have been unthinkable 3 months ago. "It is beautiful," they admitted. "But more than that, it is efficient. The processing power exceeds our most optimistic projections by several orders of magnitude." Because it's not fighting itself anymore, James realized. The quantum uncertainty and crystalline structure aren't working against each other, they're complementing each other. Maya watched the patterns shift and flow, reminded of something she'd seen in Earth's oceans. "It's like a coral reef," she mused. "Rigid structures providing foundation for constant growth and change." The best of both our approaches. First sparks form, brightened with understanding. Yes, we were so focused on maintaining perfect patterns, we never considered that patterns could be dynamic rather than static. "That's not the only breakthrough," Araya announced. "I've been analyzing the system's potential applications. This hybrid architecture could revolutionize everything from space travel to energy production. The consciousness interface aspects alone suggest possibilities we barely imagined." The chamber filled with more researchers, human and crystalline alike, all drawn by the news. Maya noticed how naturally they interacted now, the humans' casual movements contrasting with, but no longer clashing against the crystalline being's more measured motions. "We should inform the High Council immediately," the first resonator declared, then added with what Maya had learned to recognize as their species' version of humor. "Though perhaps we should prepare them gradually. Some of the patterns might be a bit unsettling." James laughed. "Remember when you thought our approach to innovation was dangerous? Now you're worried about giving your leaders too much excitement." "We are learning," the first resonator acknowledged. "Though I must admit, I never expected to find comfort in uncertainty." Maya watched First Spark explaining something to a group of human scientists, their crystalline form shifting fluidly as they spoke. "That's the real breakthrough, isn't it? Not the technology, but the mindset. You're learning to embrace change, and we're learning the value of your structured approach." "A perfect example of emergence," Araya commented. "The interaction of two different systems producing something greater than either could achieve alone." The experimental matrix continued its dance of order and chaos, generating new possibilities with every iteration. Maya couldn't help but smile as she remembered the Concordat's initial horror at human methods. Now here they were deliberately introducing uncertainty into their most advanced systems. "First Spark," she called out, "what would you say to trying something really interesting? I have an idea about applying these principles to space-time manipulation." The young researcher's form practically sparkled with enthusiasm. The calculations would be incredibly complex, the variables nearly infinite, the risks substantial. They paused for effect. "When do we start?" The first resonator made a sound that their translator didn't even try to interpret, but Maya recognized it as resignation tinged with amusement. "I suppose I should update our research protocols." Again. "Why bother?" James grinned. "We're just going to break them tomorrow anyway." As the chamber filled with the excited discussions of two species learning to combine their strengths, Maya reflected on how far they'd come. The crystalline concordat was learning to dance with chaos, while humanity was discovering the beauty of underlying patterns. Together, they were writing a new chapter in the story of civilization, one wonderful, unpredictable discovery at a time. Seeds of change. 6 months after first contact, the news of the human concordat collaboration had spread throughout known space. The RSS Curiosity, once a simple research vessel, had become the center of a scientific and cultural revolution that neither species had anticipated. Maya stood in the newly constructed Hybrid Innovation Center, watching ships arrive from across both human and concordat space. The facility itself was a testament to their evolving partnership. Its crystalline architecture incorporated seemingly random elements that somehow enhanced rather than disrupted its structural integrity. Another research delegation just dropped out of quantum space, Araya announced. This one's from the concordat's outer territories. Apparently, they've been experimenting with some of our chaos theory principles in their agricultural crystals. Agricultural crystals? James looked up from his datapad. I thought they generated all their energy through standard quantum absorption. First Spark, who had become the unofficial liaison between human and crystalline researchers, pulsed with excitement. That was before we realized we could grow food. Your concept of biological cultivation is intriguing. We've begun incorporating organic patterns into our crystalline structures. The idea of the crystalline concordat, a civilization that had prided itself on perfect stability for 10 millennia, deliberately growing changeable, organic crystalline hybrids, would have been unthinkable months ago. Now it was just another Tuesday. Speaking of hybrid structures, Maya said, how's the new space-time manipulation project coming along? First Spark's form shifted through several complex patterns. We've successfully combined your probability field technology with our crystalline navigation systems. The results are unexpected. Unexpected good or unexpected bad? James asked, though his grin suggested he already knew the answer. We can now create stable wormholes using a fraction of the energy previously required, First Spark announced. Though we're still trying to understand why they occasionally produce rainbow-colored quantum butterflies. Maya laughed. The universe has a sense of humor. We just had to learn to stop taking ourselves so seriously to see it. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent message from the first resonator, who had become one of the strongest advocates for human crystalline cooperation. Central chamber, immediately. The High Council is, well, you should see for yourself. They hurried to the chamber, finding it filled with both species watching a historic transmission. The High Council of the Crystalline Concordat, the very embodiment of unchanging order, was announcing the most radical restructuring in their civilization's history. For 10,000 years, the council leader's translated voice rang out. We sought perfection through stasis. We believed that change meant chaos, and chaos meant destruction. Our human friends have shown us a different truth. That change, even chaos, can be a path to greater understanding. The chamber erupted in a display of light and sound as crystalline beings pulsed their approval, and humans cheered. Maya noticed that even the most traditional council members now showed subtle variations in their crystalline patterns. The Concordat will no longer stand apart from the flow of time, the announcement continued. We will embrace change while honoring our traditions. Our first act under this new philosophy will be to establish joint research centers throughout both our territories, dedicated to exploring the endless possibilities that arise when different perspectives come together. James leaned closer to Maya. Did we just accidentally reform an entire civilization? I think, Maya replied thoughtfully, they reformed themselves. We just showed them it was possible. First Spark's form had taken on a complex, beautiful pattern that combined geometric precision with organic flow. We are learning that strength comes not from resisting change, but from learning to change purposefully. It is liberating. Araya's voice carried a note of satisfaction. The quantum crystalline networks are already showing increased efficiency. It seems acceptance of uncertainty actually improves performance. Who would have thought? The humans would have thought, the first resonator said, joining their group, and did think, and showed us how to think differently as well. Their crystalline form now displayed a remarkable blend of traditional structure and innovative patterns. Though I must admit, I never expected to see the High Council quoting human chaos theory in official pronouncements. Maya watched as humans and crystalline beings throughout the chamber form spontaneous discussion groups, their excitement manifesting in a symphony of voices and light patterns. The rigid divisions of species and rank had given way to something more fluid and dynamic. "Look at them," she said softly, "not just coexisting, but truly collaborating, creating something entirely new together. It goes beyond collaboration," HFY observed. "The quantum crystalline networks are showing signs of emergent properties we haven't seen before. It's as if the combination of human creativity and crystalline precision is opening up entirely new possibilities in the fabric of reality itself." First Spark pulsed with what Maya had learned to recognize as their equivalent of a grin. "We're launching a new research project tomorrow. We think we can use the hybrid systems to explore parallel dimensions. Would you like to help us break some fundamental laws of physics?" "Now that," James laughed, "sounds like my kind of chaos." As the chamber filled with the excited buzz of two species planning their next impossible achievement, Maya reflected on how far they'd come from that first tense encounter. The humans hadn't just found new allies, they'd helped awaken a sleeping giant of innovation. And the crystalline concordat hadn't simply adapted to change. They'd learned to embrace it as a source of strength. Together, they were proving that the greatest discoveries happen not when you know exactly where you're going, but when you're willing to explore every possibility along the way, even the ones that seem impossible at first glance. New Horizons, 1 year after the RSS Curiosity's fateful encounter with the crystalline concordat, Maya stood at the observation deck of the new Joint Species Assembly, a massive station that combined human adaptability with crystalline architecture. The view before her would have been impossible to imagine just 12 months ago. Ships of both species moving in a complicated dance as they constructed the first of many planned quantum crystalline arrays that would revolutionize interstellar travel. "Penny, for your thoughts?" James asked, joining her at the viewport. His uniform now bore the insignia of both Earth and the Concordat, a common sight these days. "Just thinking about how much has changed," Maya replied. "Remember when they tried to quarantine us for being too primitive? And now they're asking us to help design chaos-enhanced navigation systems." James chuckled. "Though I have to admit, their structured approach has helped us avoid some spectacular mistakes." Araya's voice joined the conversation through their comm devices. "The latest data from the quantum crystalline networks shows another 42% increase in efficiency. The crystalline engineers are still trying to understand why introducing controlled randomness makes everything work better." Speaking of understanding things, First Spark announced, their crystalline form shimmering as they approached. Their patterns had grown increasingly complex over the months, yet somehow maintained an underlying harmony that reflected their species' heritage. "We've made a breakthrough in the parallel dimension research." Maya turned from the viewport with interest. First Spark had become one of the leading researchers in what they now called probability crystal dynamics, the emerging field that combined human chaos theory with crystalline precision. "Remember those quantum butterflies we kept generating?" First Spark continued. "They weren't errors in the system. They were manifestations of probability waves crossing dimensional boundaries. We can now use them to send targeted communications across parallel realities." "Wait," James straightened. "Are you saying we accidentally invented interdimensional messaging while trying to make better wormholes?" "That's what happens when you let chaos and order work together," the first resonator said, joining their group. Their once perfect crystalline form now displayed an artful blend of structure and variation that had become fashionable among their species. "Though I must admit, Even I never expected us to be having conversations across dimensions quite so soon. Maya watched as another construction ship maneuvered a massive crystalline beam into place. The new arrays would create a network of stable wormholes throughout both species' territories, using principles that neither civilization could have developed alone. We've received another dozen applications for the exchange program, Araya reported, including, surprisingly, some from species who previously avoided contact with the Concordat. Apparently, our success has made quite an impression. Success is an understatement. First Spark pulsed enthusiastically. We're seeing advancements in everything from computing to medicine. The human concept of thinking outside the box, combined with our structural understanding, has opened up entirely new fields of study. And new questions, the first resonator added, which, as our human friends have taught us, are often more valuable than answers. Maya smiled, remembering the early days of the partnership when every new idea had to be carefully introduced to avoid shocking the crystalline scientists. Now they were often the ones proposing the most radical experiments, their innate precision providing a framework for controlled innovation. The Assembly wants to expand the program, James mentioned. They're talking about establishing contact with other isolated civilizations, sharing what we've learned about combining different approaches. Are we ready for that? Maya wondered aloud. Being ambassadors for change. First Spark's form shifted into what Maya recognized as their thoughtful pattern. A year ago, we would have said we weren't ready for any of this. Now look at us. We're building technology that neither of our species could have imagined alone. And that's the key, isn't it? The first resonator observed. Not just the technology, but the understanding that different perspectives make us stronger. That chaos and order aren't opponents, but partners in the dance of discovery. As if to emphasize their point, a test activation of the new array sent rainbow-colored quantum patterns rippling through space. The sight would have terrified the Concordat a year ago. Now their ships moved confidently through the phenomenon, their crystalline structures reflecting and enhancing the quantum effects. We've received the first responses from the parallel dimensions, Araya announced. Would you like to know what other versions of ourselves think about all this? Maya laughed. Why not? At this point, chatting with our parallel selves seems almost normal. Normal is overrated, James grinned. Just ask our crystalline friends. First Spark pulsed in agreement, their pattern briefly forming the symbol that had become the unofficial logo of their partnership, a perfect crystal of embracing a chaos pattern, creating something more beautiful than either alone. So, Maya asked, who's ready to help me test that new probability crystal drive? I have some ideas about using quantum uncertainty to explore the space between spaces. The first resonator made their species equivalent of a resigned sigh. Should I update the safety protocols first? Why bother? Everyone else replied in unison, followed by laughter that bridged species and now even dimensions. As Maya looked out at the ships dancing through rainbow quantum fields, she realized they had achieved something far greater than technological advancement. They had proven that the greatest strength lies not in perfection or chaos, but in the courage to learn from each other, to question everything, and to face the unknown together. The universe, it seemed, had an infinite supply of wonders waiting to be discovered. All it took was the right combination of precision and possibility, of structure and spontaneity, of order and chaos, and the wisdom to know that every end was just another beginning.